Hello there. So you might be expecting a 1% better interview this week or whenever you're listening to it. This is not one of those. This is actually the recording from Tuesday night book club that we kicked off just on Tuesday the 26th of May 2020 at 8 p.m. Irish time. So as I record this, it was just yesterday. And we've decided, myself and Declan O'Connell, who decided to put this together and kick it off. We said we'd record it. We said we'd share them out, provided that they're valuable. And last night, the first one where Declan talked about the book, The Power of Moments by the Heath brothers. He gave a summary, some of the key takeaways, personal connection to the book and why it really was one that he wanted to talk about. He shared all that. We had a number of other folks dial in. You can register for the Tuesday night book club. I share out the links every couple of weeks. It'll be on Eventbrite. We'll do it over Zoom. Last night was the first run. Went really well, and some good Q&A, some just good interaction. We expect it to continue. We'll do it every 2 weeks. We'll record it, and I'll put it out here for folks to listen to. So it's not 1% better. It's not me, myself, and EI. It's the Tuesday night book club, and it still has a lot of similar themes going on around personal development, professional development, perhaps self-improvement, tools and techniques, and how you can take those and apply them in your own life, make them pragmatic and useful, and it's conversational. Hopefully you'll take that from listening to this. You'll get a good sense of where we want it to go, but it's early days and I've overtalked the intro as always. So here goes. Have a listen to it. Let me know what you think. We will push these out every couple of weeks after we have them, and if you would like to join the book club, you can do so. Just connect in directly with me, Rob at robofthegreen.ie. Go to the Slack community, go to the website, there'll be links, and just keep an eye on social media and you can register, join the next one, which I'm doing on a book that I really enjoyed, that I read or listened to a few years ago, called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Cal Newport, I'll talk about that, inviting as many people along as possible, get some Q&A going, get a real book club, virtual book club going, and see how it goes from there. For now, enjoy the first edition, and we'll talk to you again soon. Good luck. Just while we're waiting, I suppose, as I said, the next one, I'm lined up to do one, but if anyone has a driving interest to give a summary next time round, that's cool as well. And I have that Slack community up. It's just something I've had for a while, and I put a channel in there called Rob and Dex Tuesday Book Club. So maybe it's something folks can find useful over time if they want to share general summaries or ideas or books that they've read. Just something to kind of point people to. And yeah, we'll just figure out how it goes. I was talking to my partner beforehand, and she was just talking to somebody in Texas today that has joined an online book club, and she lives alone, and she was saying she's getting an awful lot out of it and giving her a sense of community. So it seems to be topical at the moment, and hopefully some good will come out of it. We have one more deck, don't we? Yeah,
if you want to just join us.
Do you want to go for it? So
yeah, I suppose we'll crack on, will we?
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Yeah, fair enough. So I suppose how this all started really was I had the distinct privilege of being interviewed by Rob for his podcast, or even more so being invited into the newly refurbished studio that you see behind him. And afterwards it was the chit chat around his library and the amount of books behind him there. I just got really interested in just the depth of knowledge that he seems to have and the amount of books that he seems to have read. I was hit by that famous Aristotle quote, the more you know, the more you realise you don't know. So actually when lockdown hit, I got chatting to Rob around exchanging ideas and insights, something that might be beneficial, book that he's read that I haven't, and vice versa. And I will say that there's no real plan for this. There's no script. There's no name, and we've no idea how it will go. Good to see that there's such interest here already. So we'll just see how it goes. I kind of drew the short straw first, but I just want to get it out of the way so I can actually listen to other people talk about other books. And so when deciding what book to pick, it was actually quite difficult because I thought about what book may be kind of helpful for people during these times. And the book I've chosen is The Power of Moments. So it's a book by Chip and Dan Heath, which is a fabulously American name, Chip. But it's really, it is down that line of, self-help, personal development, coaching, that kind of book. And really all it's about is the power of the present moment. And probably more than that, it's about consciously creating moments for yourself and others. So really it's the powerful impact of thinking in moments. And the book, there's loads of different research in the book. There's nice kind of research-based and lots of kind of short stories and tales in it as well. But ultimately what it distills down to is kind of 4 basic ingredients for creating these powerful moments. And just, for a second, just make sure everybody's clear what a powerful moment is. I would say that if we just all took a couple of seconds right here, right now, and just think of a powerful moment, what jumps to mind? What jumps to your memory when you're looking at your past to see what was a powerful moment for you? So just if you just take a couple of seconds, don't force it. What pops up? So chances are there's a memory after popping up for you. So like, is it making you smile? What's in it? Who's in it? Why is it lodged in your memory? Why was it memorable? So chances are it'll have one or more of these 4 ingredients in it. And so if we know the ingredients and the recipe for powerful moments, the hypothesis of the book means that actually we can create more of these powerful moments and you can have more of a meaningful and purposeful existence. That's the whole premise behind the book. And so when I close the eyes and think for a couple of seconds, what jumps for me was a really memorable trek to Everest Base Camp. Big group of us, but most importantly, I went with my dad for his 60th birthday and my sister for her 30th birthday. So that kind of jumps up for me. And when I look at it through the lens of this book and those 4 different ingredients, we'll be able to kind of track as to why it was actually a powerful moment. So those 4 moments, really, they're 4 things. So there's 1, elevation, 2, insight, 3, pride, and 4, connection. So what I'm going to do just for the next 12 or so minutes is just give you an overview of what those 4 things actually mean. And then at the end is a kind of a prompt towards, well, how might you create more of this in your life effectively? So the first one is that elevation piece, moments of elevation. So what are they? They're experiences that rise above the routine. They're out of the norm. They're not your everyday things. And so they make us sit up and take notice. They're the times when we're kind of consciously aware and awake in that moment because it's different. And they might evoke kind of emotions or feelings like joyful, engagement, surprise, motivation. They're just, out of the ordinary. And effectively what it says is that it kind of slows down time because you're really kind of aware and awake in that moment. And the way I look at it now at the moment is like, if you look at March, the month of March just seemed like the longest month in the history of time. Like it just dragged on forever. Why? Because our whole worlds were kind of turned upside down and we were trying to make sense of it. So that actually was a moment of elevation when we all started working from home, when our daily routines were, uncomfortably shifted. And so that month of March really kind of felt like a long time because we were consciously aware and awake of all these shifts that were going on. But now as we've kind of eased our way into it, like how the hell is it nearly June? The last 2 months have just flown by. Why? Because we've just created new patterns, new routines, and we've just kind of lost ourselves in them. And what's kind of useful is there's a nice little prod in the book that it just says, can you remember where you were on September the 11th, 2011? Now, for most of us, probably not a breeze, but can you remember where you were in September 11th, 2001? Like everybody probably has a personal tale around that. Why? Because it was not like any Tuesday. The whole world stopped and was looking at these events unfolding. And so basically they talk about, well, what is it about these moments of elevation and how can we do more of them? So they kind of gave 2 stories. Really, the first was talking about boosting sensory appeal. So how do we create moments of surprise and kind of, peak emotions and that kind of stuff. And they give a nice story about this hotel in LA called the Magic Castle Hotel, and it's one of the most highly rated hotels in Los Angeles. There's a lot of competition there, but if you go on to TripAdvisor and have a look at the hotel, like, it's 3-star, it's basic, the rooms aren't great at all, they're small, they're cramped. There's a kind of a little courtyard out the back with a small swimming pool in it, and you're kind of going, how is this the highest rated hotel in LA? And what they're famous for is this thing called the Popsicle Hotline. So effectively, there's a phone next to the pool area, and you pick up the phone and you order an ice pop. And what happens is a butler effectively comes down with a silver tray and presents you with a popsicle. So these are all like peak experiences for these people, and that's something that's out of the ordinary, and it's something that I suppose enraptures the guests, and that's why that hotel is the highest rated hotel in LA. They also talk about like the Disneyland experience. So they were saying if you were to look at a day in Disneyland, they're actually the masters of creating peak moments. So a day in Disneyland might start off like getting up early, going on a shuttle bus, queuing, paying a large amount of money, and spending your day probably eating shite food, being overheated, and queuing for an awful long time. But you'll have maybe 5 seconds of a real peak moment on Space Mountain when you're thrown upside down. There's that exhilaration. And then at the end of the whole day, they have this firework display, and they have the lights show, all that kind of piece. But if you were to rate the whole day, there's probably more negative moments than positive moments. But how come everybody remembers the whole experience as being amazing? 6 months down the line, they're saying, my trip to Disneyland was incredible. And they explore this theory called the peak end theory, which is basically that we don't remember experiences as a whole. We remember the peaks, so the real high moments, and remember how they end. But all those bits in the middle kind of wash away. And it's funny, like when I look at that Everest Base Camp trip, like, so when I'm talking to people now, it's like it was amazing being in the Himalayas and seeing all the scenery and the mountains and getting to the top and the sense of achievement, and it was class. Like, so I'd go into real storytelling mode and I get really excited when I'm talking about it. But like, real honesty here, I hated every second of that trip. That 2 weeks, I vomited my way up the mountain. It was horrendous. Like, but actually, when I remember it now, it's all about that peak end piece. So the real peak piece of getting to base camp, and at the end of it, obviously great celebrations and a real bonding experience. So that's a real kind of just a nudge for us to kind of just think about how many peak moments have we experienced over the last couple of months, and can we consciously now create peak moments kind of going forward.
Dick,
can
I ask a question? Just one comment and question. One comment, weirdly enough, anyone who's eaten in ramen in Cork, you get your ice cream, which is kind of like a peak moment because it's something different, it's something new you could get at the end. You can pull your own ice cream. That was kind of one that just popped into my mind. Do the guys talk about, like, you know, when there's kind of a law of diminishing returns almost, that if you keep creating almost too many or attempting to create these peak moments constantly, that it can overwhelm or be just too much?
Yeah, well, like the way they see it here is that, particularly in the service industry, is that you need to have a bit of agility in terms of actually not doing it all the time, but actually just creating that sense of surprise. Like they give us a very interesting story about that basically part of their training is that if you're working there, then you have got a certain discretion to give away, let's say, 5 or 6 free coffees or Danishes every single week. And so if you've got a regular coming in, you know, it's at their discretion as to whether you can give something away for free. But it has to be it can't be all the time. It needs to be an element of surprise in there. But if you felt that somebody looked a bit down, that you could go and you could give them that that's sort of a boost as well. Like, but absolutely, if every single time that you're going back, then that law of diminishing returns does kick in.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Any other questions? Like from anybody, this definitely isn't a lecture or anything like that. Like, so feel free to jump in at any stage.
Have you read the any books by Michael Lewis? The American non-fiction author. He wrote Moneyball. He's actually written these non-fiction books that have been classed as unfilmable, and they all ended up as great movies. So Moneyball and The Big Short and all those ones.
Oh yes, yeah.
But no, he wrote a book called The Undoing Project, a story of two Israeli. They were psychologists who started writing in the economic field, and one of them won the Nobel Prize.
Thinking Fast and Slow, that one?
That's it, yeah, Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. He was one of the subjects of the book, and I think Michael Lewis befriended him in his old age in wherever they lived in America. But they talk about that peak end theory and how it affects people's opinions, and I think the whole book is about how gut feel is rarely right, even though it feels right. It's if you analyze it analytically and do the numbers, you're more often than not wrong. So,
no, it's fascinating kind of stuff, because I suppose all this book is trying to do is nudge you to start thinking about, now that we know these things, how can you actually apply them? So if you're working in any industry, knowing that peak end piece actually is a complete game changer. Because you can start thinking about, well, how do you create the peak experience for the customer, and how do you actually end the kind of the transaction as well?
I think it works the other way. That in the book they talk about colonoscopy, where people, they take it out fast and painfully, or slowly and less painfully, and they reckon the slowest approach is better because you don't get that peak end problem.
Yeah.
So it works the other way as well.
Yeah, I think peak end has many different connotations in that context. But yeah, like it is interesting, because they talk about, they use the term breaking the script as well. So doing things that are unexpected, and they give a nice story about the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and this went viral, so you might have seen it. A little kid who was staying there on vacation left his toy stuffed giraffe behind, and he was absolutely devastated and wouldn't sleep. So the father rang the hotel and said, look, any chance it's still there? Do you have the stuffed toy? And knowing how much it meant to the little kid, the staff, what they did was they put the stuffed giraffe in the spa with the towel around him, with cucumbers on its eyes. They put him on a golf cart. They put him out in the sun lounger, and they sent the kid all these photos just to say that the giraffe was on holidays and all this kind of piece. And what you had there is that you had, something out of the ordinary that created a lot of goodwill and a lot of, I suppose, positive benefits towards the Ritz-Carlton as well. But that's kind of all commercial kind of stuff, the real sort of impact here is maybe the personal kind of stuff is actually, are we just living the same routines and the same sort of habituated lifestyle every week, every month, every year? And where are actually the peak experiences to us? And they reference another book, which I definitely highly recommend as well, called Chasing Daylight. It's a book written by the former CEO of KPMG Global. His name is Eugene O'Kelly. And basically, he wrote the book at age 53 when he was given 3 months to live. And that's the first line of the book was, I was blessed to learn that I have 3 months to live. And what he talks about is that he felt so blessed and privileged to have been given 3 months. And what he did was he strategically went about planning those 3 months. Who are the people I want to spend time with, and how will I create perfect moments with these people as a kind of a, in typical accounting language, he said, as a natural unwinding of the relationship. So he went about, meeting people for lunch in the park, going for, these peak experiences, going to a basketball game with other people, and just actually planning to spend quality time. And towards the end of the book, he said that he had created more perfect moments in a couple of weeks than he had done in the previous 10 years. And the kind of the nudge towards it was saying, do we really have to wait till we get the knock on the door, illness-wise or health-wise, for us to create these perfect moments? I just thought it was a really powerful book, but to see it through the lens of the power of moments. The challenge in the book was to say is actually, could you actually script out your perfect day? Like, it doesn't need to be, crazy of going and seeing your top sports team or going to a concert or anything like that. Like, but if you could script a perfect day at home or whatever it was, could you do it? And could you then actually commit yourself to actually live that perfect day as well? And then it goes on to say, well, geez, could you actually script 30 perfect days? How long would it take you to live those 30 perfect days? So again, it was just about how might you now apply those perfect moments to your own life, which is really, really interesting, I think. The second bit is just around that insight. So all it is just about when one of the moments that you create personal insight for yourself. And they have a nice little phrase of tripping over the truth. So you might have a vision of yourself or a vision of others that may not strictly be true, but there'll come a moment when you'll trip over the truth, and that creates real kind of insight for yourself. So the way they say it is like it's an aha moment, and we've all had them. Most of the time it's about failure, moments of failure. And so really the nudge towards this is actually about embracing vulnerability, trying new things, and embracing failure. And they talk about, different companies over in the States, and it's cheesy enough, but like they have to talk about, well, what did you fail at this week? That kind of stuff. So it just shows that you're trying to build a culture of, look, you're trying something new, you're taking risks. Failure is a good thing. And they just talk about, if you look back over your life, you probably have had a mentor, somebody who has guided you in the right direction. And they're saying no matter what age or experience you have at the moment, there's always value in maybe seeking out another mentor to see, can you spike your growth again? And then I suppose that they were looking at the other side of that is, can you now mentor somebody else? Can you kind of pass it forward? And they have a nice simple formula for mentoring that says high standards plus direction plus assurance plus support will get you an awful lot of results. And I thought that was a really nice little formula. So high standards plus direction plus assurance plus support. And they just talk about when that mentor gave you that piece of advice, how did you feel? It was that elevated moment of emotion. It was, Jesus, somebody believes in me here and I can push now for a higher level. And then they'll talk about the experience of being a mentor and just in unlocking or empowering somebody else to reach their own potential as well. So that's that insight piece. The third bit is the element of pride. Depending on your persuasion, it can be one of the 7 deadly sins, but they're talking about it in a real positive sense here. It's about capturing us at our best. So when was the last moment that you were really proud of yourself? And they start talking about building in milestones that can help you build that sense of pride. And they give a nice little story about how the Couch to 5K program was so successful. And it came off the back of a guy, 25 years of age, went through a bad relationship breakup and wanted to start jogging just as a focus to take away from the heartache. And he found that he hated running. So what he did was broke it down into a 9-week program. And then he decided he'd like to push this out to other people. And all of a sudden, this community started snowballing. And if you look at the Couch to 5K program, it starts quite easily. I think it's 20 seconds of running followed by 90 seconds of walking, and you do that for 20 minutes. Halfway through, I think it's you do 10 minutes running, then you walk, and then you another 10 minutes of running. And there's a midpoint halfway through the Couch to 5K program where you run for 20 minutes non-stop. And that's seen as a real sort of I suppose, a flag in the ground moment to say that actually you're running non-stop for 20 minutes. And what you're doing is you're creating levels of pride every single time you hit those milestones. And by the end of the 9 weeks, obviously, you've done your 5K. There's plenty of 5K races out there. But this whole community, I suppose, celebrates the fact that 9 weeks ago, you couldn't get up off the couch. And now here you are running a 5K race. And so it just talks about, well, can we now start creating some of the milestone moments in our own life? And if you look at it, the societal milestone moments, they're like your 18th birthday, your 21st, when you graduate, your first job, your first house, marriage, kids. All these pieces are kind of, by society standards, they're all probably done by the time you're 40 maybe. And then, like they were saying, that's why people get old quickly, actually, because the kind of the milestone moments aren't there unless you create them. So it's about sort of creating multiple finish lines for your goal. And it goes through a couple of different examples about, learning the guitar. Most people try it for a couple of weeks and throw their hat at it. But if you can break it down into, do you want to learn one chord? Do you want to learn another chord? Do you want to maybe learn the opening bars to a certain song? That kind of way, that if you break it down, you're much more likely to achieve your goals. But yeah, like it's interesting even how you look at how the fitness industry have actually moved on that. Like, so I'm a sucker for the Fitbit stuff. Like, and every single day I get that buzz of excitement when the thing goes mad when I've hit the 10,000 steps. And actually, only last week, I think it was, I got an interesting email off Fitbit to give me my Italy badge, to say that I've walked the length of Italy. So it's not like they don't celebrate like your 1 millionth step or your anything like that. They'll actually link it to something that's quite interesting. God, you've walked the length of Italy, magic. And you actually do feel that sense of pride there. So no, it's quite interesting. And one of the really fascinating experiments they touched on was a study done with arachnophobes, so people who were scared of spiders. And they were saying, well, how long would it take us to get an arachnophobe to let a tarantula crawl all over its hand? And so what they did is they broke it down to 14 steps. So step number 1 was how close can you get to a tarantula? And the average distance between yourself and the tarantula was 10 feet. That's as far as I'm going, not going near it. And all the 14 steps was like all just nudging closer, 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 to the point, I think step number 10 was that they poked the tarantula with a stick, like that kind of way. To step 14 was my hand is out there and the tarantula's crawling on it. And I'd be really interested to hear your best estimate here as to how long you think it took an arachnophobe to get from step 1 to step 14. Any ideas?
A week?
A week?
A year?
A year?
It's about 4 months.
4 months. So, interesting enough, it actually took them 2 hours.
Jesus.
I found that absolutely fascinating. But what they're saying is that it was the like pride kind of imbues courage. So you get to one step and you're kind of proud of yourself, and it empowers you, and it allows you to take the next step quite quickly. So there's an interesting chapter just around courage there as well. Actually, that if you can tap into courage, you're much more likely to achieve those moments of pride by just taking those small steps. And they talk about practicing courage as well.
To be confident, to be a self-confidence in that as well, I would have thought, right?
Yeah, there is, and that's the whole thing about self-efficacy. Like, is that once you get over one hurdle, you're more likely to take the next hurdle. But it's funny, like in terms of the courage thing, like I wouldn't know my American history, but there's a really interesting chapter on the racism rose in Nashville when black students got sick of segregation at the canteen and they staged a sit-in, and it eventually, like, they all got locked up after 3 weeks of sit-in, and there was just that was deemed as the kind of the turning point for race relations there. But you know what, the kind of the unspoken behind that was actually they practiced those sit-ins. So they spent a couple of months beforehand practicing courage effectively. So they were super organized. They had people, I suppose, coaching them how to stay solid and not be sort of overwhelmed by the level of violence and hate that was coming their way. So it's really interesting about how practicing courage can help you move towards those milestone moments. And there, like the fourth one, there is that connection piece, and all that is just saying is that it, you know, whatever thought that you had at the very start of this call when you thought about, you know, that powerful moment, chances are there was other people involved. There was, you know, think of weddings, achievements, graduations. There probably was other people involved there, and that social experience makes it that bit more powerful, that bit more of a peak moment. And they talk about, you know, that idea of a community, that there's purpose, there's meaning, there's intrigue, there's challenge, all involved in community. And I suppose what we have here tonight is probably that sense as well, is that people are, you know, strangers coming together for one purpose. We're looking to sort of educate ourselves, or we're looking to be part of a community. We're hoping to gain something out of this as well. And I suppose it's actually something, Rob, that I mentioned on our call as well, was on our interview, was the idea of deepening connection as well. So do you remember I talked about that experiment where you go through 36 questions and 3 levels of intimacy?
I looked into it since, yeah.
So it actually comes up in this book as well. So like what it's saying is that time doesn't impact intimacy at all. So you could know somebody for 20 years and you could still be at a kind of a level 1, surface level in terms of a connection. So you actually have to purposefully create an intimacy. So how much are you willing to reveal of yourself? How much are you willing to invest in developing intimacy? And so ultimately, they're the kind of the 4 real ingredients for the peak, the power of moments and those peak experiences. And so when I look at that Everest Base Camp thing, for me, it had all 4 of them, those moments of elevation, you know, outside my norm. It definitely had a sense of insight for myself. Jesus, I can actually do this. What else can I do? That pride element of getting to the top, that was certainly there. And then there was that connection piece there as well. So obviously doing it with my members of my family. And I can show you a picture there now. So that's us at the top. So there's that moment of peak experience and elevation for us. And so, like, it's really interesting now that we know those 4 ingredients, we can kind of start looking at how do we start creating more of that. And so for me, and I just wrote them down today, it's a case of, well, how do I create more of it? Like, so in terms of elevation, how could I make tomorrow memorable? How can I do something a bit different off the script for tomorrow? In terms of insight, I'm going to start thinking about, you know, is there an opportunity for me to mentor somebody? In terms of the pride element, I'm going to start thinking about new goals. What would make me proud? And the connection piece, for me, it's actually going to be using this time to maybe just connect with old friends, people I've lost touch with. And it's funny that the last section of the book, it kind of ties it all together. And I'll just share the screen again there now and see if you can see this. It talks about that book, Regrets of the Dying. So that palliative care nurse she looked at, well, what were the 5 most common themes of people who were on their deathbed, and they talk about the courage not to live a life true to yourself, not to work so hard and express your feelings, and not staying in touch with friends, and letting yourself be happier. And I suppose what they were saying, that if we start thinking in moments, you can actually have a bit of an antidote to 5 of those things. And so these 5 things kind of come up throughout the book. So actually, to avoid those regrets of the dying, if we can start thinking in moments, to maybe stretch yourself to discover what you're truly capable of. Can you take on some element of a project that kind of scares you? Can you intentionally create those perfect moments? So like that KPMG guy, can you actually pencil out what would a perfect day, a perfect moment look like, and actually create time to live it out. Third one is practice courage, so being open with people. 4 is the value of connection, and 5 is break the script beyond all routines and habits. So what routines and habits are serving you, and how might you break the script and reevaluate them. So that's pretty much it. Basically, that's the kind of the overview of the book. Happy to take any questions or to talk it through.
Well done. Thanks very much.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great stuff. Any questions? Any thoughts? Or
I think the meditation company, Headspace. They I don't use Headspace. I use a different app, but I know they send out those. You've meditated 100 consecutive days in a row, kind of reminders, and you can share them on social and whatnot. And that very much ties in with the pride element, similar to the Couch to 5K. It's kind of just creating those milestones. Just that kind of jumped into my mind when you mentioned that one.
Yeah, and there, to be fair, like in the book, there is a bit of a commercial aspect to it as well. It's how can you improve the customer experience, and you can go down that route with it. Personally, myself, I kind of look at, well, how can you take those and apply them to yourself? But there's definitely something in that, the streak thing where you're doing 100 days in a row or whatever it is, walk the length of Italy. Companies have started tapping into that kind of psychology.
Habits. It's all about getting into good habits.
Yeah, exactly.
I was saying to you that I read a book the guys put together called Switch. The Heath brothers did a book called Switch. Very, very interesting. I won't go into detail on it now, but it was good. But I listened to the younger brother was on a podcast last week, and he was talking about another book that he either put out or is putting out around sticky ideas, things that why certain ideas stick. And they were talking about the movie industry, and they were talking about a title for a film, trying to pitch it, and they were coming up with brilliant like one-liners. Say, the example he gave was think Die Hard, but on a bus, and basically that was their pitch for Die Hard on a Bus, which was the movie Speed, but instantly that line creates a movie reel in your head. You connect with it. And you don't need to say any more. You kind of get the concept of the movie. So like these guys get into so much detail in imagery and emotion. I think they tie a lot of connection to that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, it's fascinating as well. Just once we're made aware of that kind of stuff, we can start looking out for it, that kind of way.
Yeah.
But that is the whole philosophy behind the power of moments, is just being a bit more consciously awake and consciously aware of the patterns, routines we're in, and how can we break them and create a bit more moments of elevation for ourselves.
Yeah, very good, Dak.
So Rob, you're next up, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm planning to do it next. The book that I'm hoping to do is one that's just been rolling around in my head recently because I'm changing job, and it kind of helped me a lot with that. So Good They Can't Ignore You is the name of the book by Cal Newport. Hopefully most of you haven't read it, because that'll be more valuable then if you haven't, or if you want to read it between now and then. That's you can bring your own comments to it, but that's what I'll kind of talk through. Similar to you, Dec, there's a lot of personal journeying coming out from that book for me, so that's kind of the approach I'll probably talk through and some of the key points out of it. I will be happy to do that.
I haven't read it anyway. So
Oh, good. That's good.
Yeah.
Has anyone else read it? Oh, that's good. It is one that you probably haven't heard of, and the so good they can't ignore you comes from Steve Martin, the comedian. I think he came up with the slogan, but Cal Newport, who's a lot younger than Steve Martin, he's only in his late 30s and he's about 5 or 6 books out, but he just used it as kind of a hook for the talk of the book, you know.
Cool. Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I guess between now and then as well, like when we come back, kind of some of the planning that we put together for this, obviously so rigid and structured for these sessions, but we did say maybe if anyone reads the book you talked about, The Power of Moments, or take some of the learnings and have applied it in the next 2 weeks, maybe you'd share for 5 minutes, is there anything that you put into practice from those 4 kind of ingredients? Has anything stood out for you? Have you made a conscious effort to create those moments? It'd be great to hear if anyone has done anything like that.
Brilliant, yeah. So look, we can do a quick recap the next time and then crack on with your book review, and then throw it wide open to the community if people are interested in sharing books that have really impacted them. We'd love to keep the thing going and just let it snowball. I suppose we'll all kind of learn from each other, which is probably the whole purpose of why this was created. Cool.
Very good.
We'll
all
wrap
right.
it up.
Very good, guys. Thanks. And thanks for everybody for coming along. And I will, as I said, I've recorded the audio, so I'm going to pop it out onto the podcast channel over the next few days anyway, just in case people want to listen to that. Something different, might be something people get something out of as well. And we'll hopefully meet all of you in 2 weeks. I'll put out another link because Eventbrite, they pretty much don't allow you to do bi-weekly meetings, but if you join if you're a member on the Slack community, we can post the link there as well, Dex, so people can just get it through that rather than register if that's easier. Whatever way, you'll see some social posts on it anyway.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Rob, I'm on the Slack right now. I can't see the book club. Is that up there?
It is, because it's a new channel that I set up about 2 weeks ago, but I haven't added everybody to it. I was really only adding people to it by request. So, John, let me just add you right now here. Are you just John? Is that what you have on it?
It looks like it, yeah.
You're very unique there, because there's a few Johns. So I've just added you to it now. Yeah. There you go.
Excellent.
So we'll pop the link in there, and that's a good way to kind of submit any ideas or anything at all that you can come up with. Pop it in there, book related. Great stuff, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of evening, Deck. Thanks a million for being the guinea pig. Had you a question, John? No, just saying goodbye. All right. Okay. Very good.
Everybody, we're looking forward to 2 weeks' time.
Very good, guys.
Thanks very much, guys. Brilliant.
Yeah. Stay safe. Take it easy.